Once upon a time, behind the high Victorian Gothic buildings of Hartford Public High School in Hartford, Connecticut, stood another Victorian-era campus along Broad Street. The buildings are long gone, but the oldest of them was home to the Hartford Theological Seminary for 45 years, and there was quite an architectural squabble when they were built that led to the firing of a noted architect. One of the buildings was also home to the Hart School of Music for a quarter century. Hi, this is History with me, Dan Sterner. Remember to hit the subscribe button as we look back at a lost Hartford campus. The Hartford Seminary has been in existence under several different names since 1834. Now located on Sherman Street, it was renamed the Hartford International University for Religion and Peace in 2021. In its early years, it was the Theological Institute of Connecticut and was located in East Windsor Hill, a relatively isolated location that was deliberately chosen to protect students from the temptations of a city. Enrollment declined during the period of the Civil War, and after the adjacent East Windsor Hill Academy closed in 1865, the institute was moved to the bustling city of Hartford. Renamed the Hartford Theological Seminary, it occupied the former home of Daniel Wadsworth, located on Prospect Street, just to the rear of the Wadsworth Athenaeum. Enrollment soon improved, and the seminary found itself in need of a larger space that would be better adapted to its mission. In 1877, the institution purchased land on Broad Street, and the following year, having received a generous donation from their patron, James B. Hosmer, began the process of erecting a dedicated seminary building on the site. The seminary hired architect Francis H. Kimball, who had recently worked on another collegiate project in Hartford, the Long Walk at Trinity College. The new seminary building, to be called Hosmer Hall, was a U-shaped structure with a chapel at the northeast corner. On the south side of the building was a separate library structure attached to the main building by a short corridor. The first thing to be built, however, in late 1878, was a completely separate gymnasium to the rear of the lot. The contractors chosen to erect these buildings were John R. Hills and John B. Garvey, who had also built the famous Mark Twain House in Hartford just a few years before. Unfortunately, in constructing the new seminary buildings, they would pursue their own course, disregarding architect Kimball's instructions. The background of this troubling situation was described for a national audience by Kimball's friend, the Hartford architect William Brocklesby, in the September 13, 1879 issue of the American Architect and Building News. Using the pseudonym Chetwood, he explained that after Kimball had submitted his initial plans to the building committee, quote, much delay was occasioned by the absence of members of the committee whose views regarding the interior arrangement of the buildings must be considered, and under these circumstances the completion of the plans was deferred. Early in the fall, the gymnasium was built, and the work being in the hands of a builder who boasts that he gets rid of the architect as soon as the plans are finished, the appearance of the structure was marred, and the drawings were not followed, under the builder's pretense that he was saving money for the committee by carrying out his own ideas. A deaf ear was turned to the architect, and the builder, having thus succeeded in spoiling one building, thirsted for more. Unquote. As shown here, Kimball had originally envisioned an elaborate Gothic design for Hosmer Hall, featuring a steep hip roof and a variety of arched windows. There was to be a grand spire over the corner chapel, and behind it, at one of the U ends, was to be a dining hall marked with its own spire. The semi-detached library was a smaller but highly ornamented structure with its own spire. The structure that was actually built by Hills and Garvey assisted by New York architect John Corregia, was much simplified. There ended up being only one spire, reduced in size and decoration, above the chapel. Kimball's rear dining hall section was completely eliminated, and the attached library was greatly reduced in size and ornamentation. Most of Kimball's arched windows were simplified to plainer square-topped ones, and the steep roof was replaced with a mansard roof that had wooden dormer windows. Hills and Garvey were following the dictates of the chairman of the building committee, Newton Case, who was also the seminary's treasurer. Case insisted that he wanted the building to be plain and free of so-called improper ornamentation. As he was later quoted, excess or florid ornamentation would not comport well with our creed. The contractors also claimed that they were saving money, and in 1879 Kimball was relieved of his position as architect on the project on the grounds that his design was too expensive. After he was fired, Kimball obtained an estimate for his own satisfaction that showed that his design could have been erected for $14,000 less than Hill and Garvey's figures. Kimball's friend Brocklesby was unsparing in his criticism of what the contractors built, noting what he described as its ugliness, and writing that while the basic form of the building remained the same, quote, "Upon the foundation has been erected a building which far from graces its fine location, and is a caricature of the merest approach to architecture," unquote. He lamented the loss of Kimball's molded and ornamental brickwork and the many round-arched windows, and also the fact that the roof now had wooden dormers that were, quote, "devoid of design, and in their baldness and poverty of treatment but keeping pace with the timid buttresses, the feeble cornice, and other features now attracting the public eye," unquote. Despite the controversy of its construction, Hosmer Hall served the seminary for 45 years. Surviving from Kimball's design, although simplified, were 3 tall arched windows that lit the seminary's chapel. Other rooms in Hosmer Hall included a student social room, and in an attached annex was a music room. The upper stories had more than 50 suites of students' rooms. If you are enjoying this video, remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Wealthy businessman Newton Case continued to be a great benefactor to the seminary. During the 1880s, his generosity significantly enlarged the institution's collection of books, which soon outgrew the original library, which, as I mentioned, was attached on the south side of Hosmer Hall. Case eventually acquired land just south of the seminary property for a new and larger library to be constructed. He urged the seminary to raise money to build it, but he was soon prevailed upon by the trustees to provide the money himself. Otherwise, another donor's name, say a Mr. Jones, might end up attached to the building, so it would then become the Jones Library with Mr. Case's books inside. How much better than for it to be the Case Library both inside and out? Mr. Case bowed to this logic. The building committee approved some pencil sketches made in consultation with the seminary's librarian, and architect George H. Gilbert was hired to prepare the plans, although with strict instructions to follow the intentions of the sketches without material changes. John R. Hills was again employed as builder, this time in association with Stephen D. Stoddard. Newton Case died in 1890 at the age of 83, not long after ground was broken. The Romanesque-style building, named the Case Memorial Library, featured a corner tower and a large arch over the front entrance, reached by a grand set of stairs. Dedicated in 1893, its large main room was designed to accommodate a book and periodical collection that continued to grow over the years. This photograph shows a southward view with the rear of the new library on the left and the earlier gymnasium building on the right. The new library was attached just south of the original library, which was converted to become a missionary museum. The museum was centered on a collection previously displayed in the rooms of the Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions in Boston. It consisted of items sent by missionaries from various parts of the world that illustrated indigenous customs and religions, or were associated with the work of the board and its missionaries. Similar additional items were given by the seminary's alumni and friends. There was also a collection of prehistoric Native American pottery, and at the west end of the museum, the Palestinian Ethnological Collection, which included a completely furnished home and a Bedouin tent, along with other objects illustrating daily life in the Middle East. The seminary also acquired the property just to the north at the corner of Broad Street and Farmington Avenue. This was later sold to the Y.W.C.A Insurance Company, which erected a building there in 1914. As for the Hartford Seminary, it remained on Broad Street until it moved to a new location off Sherman Street in 1926. This was a collegiate Gothic-style campus that is now the home of UCONN Law School. Back on Broad Street, Hosmer Hall, whose architecture was once lambasted by William Brocklesby, was sold to the Y.W.C.A, which replaced it with a new women's dormitory, reusing some of the bricks from the demolished Hosmer Hall. Designed in the colonial revival style by architect Roy D. Bezet, the building was dedicated in 1928. Later named Wolverton Hall, it was torn down in 1972. The Y.W.C.A.'s current building, erected in 1974, stands on the former site of Wolverton Hall and the neighboring Y.W.C.A Insurance Company building. While Hosmer Hall disappeared in 1926, the Case Memorial Library stood for another 38 years. Both it and the former seminary gymnasium were used by the Y.W.C.A, but in 1938 the former library was rededicated as the new home of the Julius Hart Musical Foundation. First established in 1920 and now known as the Hart School of Music, it became part of the University of Hartford in the late 1950s and moved to the university's campus on Bloomfield Avenue in 1963. The former Case Memorial Library Hart School building was demolished in January 1964 to make way for the arrival of I-84. The last of the buildings erected by the Hartford Seminary along Broad Street disappeared over 60 years ago, but many generations of seminarians and later music students passed through these buildings from 1880 until 1963. Despite Brocklesby's misgivings, they did complement the architecture of the neighboring Gothic towers of Hartford Public High School, making this quite an educational neighborhood at one time. Check out my videos on Hartford High and the lost Y.W.C.A Insurance Building, and thanks for watching.